Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Coach Prime, the Colorado Buffaloes, heading to Lincoln, Nebraska Saturday night. And Dill, we already did the preview and prediction for this football game, but this is one of the bigger football games, I think personally, that we're going to see all of 2024. So we're going to do a little bit of a deeper dive into this game. Dill, we did the Nebraska keys to the game. Now we're running it back from the perspective of Colorado. Meaning, what can Colorado do to get after this Nebraska team Saturday night in Lincoln, Nebraska? Fired up to get into it. Now, before we do it, as always, number one, let it fly in the comment section. Whether you're a Nebraska fan, whether you're a Colorado fan, it's a blast talking ball with you guys in the comment section. More importantly, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. The support for these game breakdowns and these keys to the games, it's been a blast for the boys to do. Can't thank you guys enough for all the support. Dill, without further ado, I think it starts with finding your matchups, and this is going to be a key for Colorado pretty much every single game they play, where you got four wide receivers. I think this might be the most underrated wide receiver room you see in the country. Like, the lack of respect, a lot of the attention goes to Travis Hunter, who is a phenomenal football player, arguably the best football player in the country. Jimmy Horn Jr., LeJontay Wester, Will Shepherd, who had a quiet game, but this was one of the better wide receivers we saw in the SEC over the last couple of years. They are going to play a lot of four wide receiver sets. They only played a tight end on 13 out of the 60 snaps they played against North Dakota State. That's going to put a lot of stress on opposing defenses. There's not a lot of defenses, especially in the Big Ten, that play four wide receiver sets. In fact, most offenses in the Big Ten play with more 12 personnel than they do four wide receiver sets. The most important thing I think Colorado can do in this football game is find your matchups and attack it. And you saw UTEP kind of do that a little bit, right? Malcolm Hartzog, man coverage. They won 45-yard touchdown. What matchups can Colorado attack against Nebraska is probably one of the bigger keys to this football game here.
And that's going to be, I think, the fundamental challenge for any defense playing this Colorado offense is you only have so many kind of corners who can legit stick with these wide receivers. So again, when you get your matchups on safety, like when Jimmy Horn got his matchups against safeties in that North Dakota State game, he made him pay for it, and not just made him pay for like a 20-yard gain, but made him pay for touchdowns. I think that's going to be, frankly, what Colorado is probably going to lean on all year is when they get their matchups, they're not just going to stop at taking a 20-yard gain. They're going to try to get really explosive and hit those touchdown plays. And I don't even think that only extends to that wide receiver room. One thing I'm going to be looking at, just like we were last year with Dylan Edwards, is what can this running back room do against these linebackers? And frankly, I'm kind of looking at Draylon Miller playing a little bit more in the backfield because honestly, I think that was the one part you were really disappointed with if you're a Colorado fan, is that running back production just wasn't there. I thought Dallin Hayden didn't have a particularly great game, but Draylon Miller looked pretty comfortable carrying the ball. And I think he's a guy, if you put him in that running or in that backfield, can be really, really tough for these Nebraska linebackers to deal with because he's got good enough running back instincts to be dangerous, but he can really run routes, obviously. That's what he recruited coming out as a wideout.
The thing is with Draylon Miller, and we kind of said this when Draylon Miller committed to Colorado back in December, is like this kid is kind of like Deebo Samuel. He is built like a running back. He's 5'11", 205 pounds, but has the pass-catching skills of a wide receiver. So you saw them get Draylon Miller involved as a running back. But I think the more exciting matchup is if Nebraska does go to some man coverage and a linebacker is trying to run with Draylon Miller out of the backfield, that is a matchup that you're going to all day long. And Dill, you look at like how this Colorado offense can operate with Will Shepherd, Travis Hunter, Jimmy Horn, and LeJontay Wester as your wide receivers, and then Draylon Miller at the running back.
Well, because those guys can create so much space on the boundary. I think that is prime position for a running back who's a little bit more versatile than maybe the Dallin Haynes or Charlie Offerdells to really go off and kind of make teams pay for essentially trying to contain that group of four.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, it's like find me this many defenses that can deal with that much athleticism and playmaking from those five skill position players. There's just not many defenses that will be able to deal with that. I think Draylon Miller, I think that's a massive point. Draylon Miller is going to be this, I think, X factor in this football game for Colorado. I think number two, you got to stay on schedule. And we've talked about this a lot for Colorado, even going back to last year, where what Colorado got in trouble was they struggled to run the football, which they struggled to run the football again against North Dakota State, only averaging 2.6 yards per carry. That being said, I'm not necessarily, you get some people get up here and say, you got to run the football to keep the defense honest. Yes, to a point, but you can also have that run game be just an extension of the pass game in terms of, hey, we're just going to throw some swing passes. We're going to have some jet sweeps, some of those things that your high percentage throws, you're essentially running the football, but you're going to have some success and get into more of those 2nd and 5s and 3rd and 3s where this offense is staying on schedule, because when you see Colorado struggle, it's in those 3rd and longs when it's obvious passing situations and opposing defenses are able to pin their ears back and get after this offensive line and pass protection. Look, Tony White is a mastermind on the defensive side of the football, specifically in those 3rd and long situations where he can get creative in terms of his play calling. Colorado's got to find a way, whether it's running the football, whether it's kind of that quick game extension of the run game, to stay out of these 3rd and long situations.
And I think a big part of that is, frankly, you still probably got to try to keep defensive lines honest, because I get the offensive lines improved, but they still were giving up 30% pressure rate against that North Dakota State team. And I think Colorado or Nebraska is a considerably better defensive line than that North Dakota State team was. Sorry. I think they really do need to try to do something to keep that defensive line honest, whether that's screens, whether that's some of those swings, just something that, again, I don't see them being able to run the ball particularly well, frankly, in this football game. So, again, it will be about what can they do with those boundary wide receivers and a versatile running back to do something that, isn't just dropping back to pass and letting those defensive linemen know that
and that is something that Sheduer is excellent at. Like, we see him make all these like top Sports Center top 10 highlight throws. What you don't always see when you look at the highlights is just the high percentage throws that he routinely makes. And I feel like a lot of times as college football fans, we take those throws for granted. Though as Michigan fans that have endured some shaky quarterback play at times, we don't take those throws for granted. Sheduer Sanders is excellent at just making the throws he has to make. And so Sheduer Sanders is a quarterback that can keep this offense on schedule. He's got to make those throws out there on Saturday night, which, we're pretty confident that he can do. Now, on the defensive side of the football, my number one key for Colorado, and you went to the transfer portal and you brought in some of the better – I really think some of the better pass rushers that were present in the transfer portal. You talk about Deion Hayes, 27 quarterback hurries last year. You talk about B.J. Green, was a second-team all Pac-12 edge rusher last year. Look, we feel really good about 4 out of the 5 starting offensive linemen for Nebraska. The left tackle spot, they had their starting left tackle go down with an injury during fall camp. It's going to be Turner Corcoran. And Turner Corcoran, Nebraska fans will tell you this themselves, has been shaky at times at left tackle. This is the game that you brought B.J. Green or Deion Hayes in for. Can you get after Turner Corcoran at that left tackle spot? The best way to throw off a young quarterback who is very talented is get some pressure on him. Can they do that, and can they make it happen? Probably the biggest storyline of this Colorado defense here.
And they didn't get a particularly great chance, I think, to show what they can do in the past. Honestly, I was very impressed with their ability in the run game. I thought Deion Hayes had a great game. And frankly, that's probably where it starts for him, Samuel, B.J. Green, all those guys. Like, they got to play good both ways. They got to play good against the run to set themselves up in that ability to rush the passer. But I think you're right. Those guys against that left tackle spot for Nebraska, that, again, we're going to have to see it this year because we haven't really seen it in the past from Turner Corcoran. I mean, you get out there, make some of those huge game impacting plays. That's all Colorado probably needs, because I think you like where you're at on the offense side of the ball. I think they have supreme confidence that they'll move it against anyone. So when you kind of play that way on offense, you don't need to necessarily be great every down on defense, but you need to make more high impact plays than what they were able to make last year.
I totally agree, and I think that's a perfect segue into play on your terms. Like, you got to be aggressive, kind of like they were against North Dakota State at times in terms of walking safeties into the box and being aggressive and saying, hey, are we going to give up some explosive plays at times? Yeah, absolutely, but we're not going to let North Dakota State just run the football for 5 yards per carry down the field. If this game gets into a shootout, that favors Colorado. Like, that's how you want this game to look, as opposed to it being a slow game where Nebraska's staying on the field a lot on offense. So you kind of talked about taking risks in terms of creating negative plays, and you might give up a play or two. Yeah, sure. I think that's much better. If you give up a 50-yard touchdown pass, that's okay. It's a hell of a lot better than them going 10 plays or 15 plays for 80 yards and a touchdown, and Sheduer Sanders is sitting on the bench for a majority of the second quarter. And so when I say
but you also got to make those plays. You can take your risks, but that's where I think, like, 100%. You got to hope that transfer portal talent that you bring in is a higher caliber than what it was last year. And you have defensive linemen who, when they get a chance in a one-on-one matchup, can go win it. Or you have obviously some players in the secondary like a DJ McKinney or Preston Hodge who have better instincts and can go get after the passer, especially Preston Hodge. I want to see, can you get your nickelback involved in that pass rush or make one of those plays? That's going to be the crucial thing, because I think at the end of the day, you only need a couple of them. And I think you said it right. It's okay if you don't take any risks. I think Nebraska can move the ball anyway. So take them, make them. If you do that just a couple of times, I think you set yourself up really.
Yeah, if you just sit in that nickel package and leaving your safeties high and just let Nebraska go on these 8-minute drives where they're running the football and letting that clock run, that's how Nebraska wants this game to look. You got to take risk, make this game a shootout. You know what I mean? Where there's a lot of different. You want Sheduer Sanders touching the ball as many times as you can. If there can be 30 possessions each way in this football game, that's what you want as opposed to 7. And so,
and at the end of the day, you also do have a freshman quarterback, and I love the way Dylan Raiola played. I think he adds a lot to this Nebraska team.
yeah.
It frankly makes them harder to deal with than what they were last year when Colorado saw him. But he is a freshman. He is a gunslinger. I think he'll take his chances. That's where you got to look for Colorado to be able to take advantage of that. And if you can get some pressure and he throws the ball up, go make a play on the ball, and you change the game entirely.
You want this game to be a quarterback duel. Like I said it at the top, I think Sheduer Sanders is probably the best quarterback in the country in my book after what we just saw against North Dakota State. If this game goes into a quarterback duel, hey, I love Dylan Raiola. I don't love him as much as Sheduer Sanders right now as a Sheduer Sanders being obviously a senior and Dylan as a freshman. So you kind of trust Sheduer to win that quarterback duel against Nebraska. That's kind of the keys for this Colorado program. We're fired up for this game. Probably going to talk more about it towards the end of the week as well. Again, we'll cut it there, though. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.